Most of us don't seek out hardship, but just as businesses that don't change learn their lesson the hard way, people would do much better to face and even embrace tough times. That's the argument that Amanda Lang makes in her new book, The Beauty of Discomfort, how what we avoid is what we need. She is, of course, a longtime business journalist, now the producer and anchor of Bloomberg North on Bloomberg TV Canada, and we're pleased to welcome Amanda Lang to our studio. Welcome.
Great to be here.
I loved this book.
Thank you.
I really did, and I'm not just saying that because you're sitting right here. It was a really good book. But you're known as a business journalist, and this is a psychology/self-help book. Why did you want to write this particular book?
So the book itself grew out of my first book, The Power of Why, which was really about asking the right questions and how important that is, and engaging in your life and really exploring what you're doing and why. This book really emerged because it became clear to me that even when we have the right questions in front of us and we get an answer, that's a hard process. So we've got our answer. We don't do anything with it. We don't act on the answer that we have. We all have these lists of things we wish we did more of, whether it's meditating or jogging, and we don't do them. And so I sort of set off on this path of why do we resist change and why is change so hard? And as a business journalist, I'm obviously very interested in this for businesses because adaptability right now is the most important skill. Right? And originally, as I was writing the book, there were business stories woven in, which I did in The Power of Why. And then I came to a point where comparing a 14-year-old's journey through blindness to Microsoft competing with Apple felt so wrong and so disconnected that I thought, I can't actually have those business case studies. They're not adding anything. And in the end, business change is about getting people to change. So I felt as though it can work for business managers if they want to read it and understand how to help their employees. It'll help employees because we're all employees somewhere. But I didn't want to just, I guess, dilute the power of these people's stories.
Now, when I was a kid, I was super shy. I hated public speaking. I once gave a speech when I was looking up like that. But for some reason, I was drawn to broadcasting. But you say it's good to always be a little uncomfortable. Why?
So I just want to start by saying that when I was a kid, I was really shy.
No way!
And I hated public speaking and found it really hard. For instance, cocktail parties just left me flummoxed. What on earth am I supposed to talk to people?
Do you know what I do at cocktail parties?
Interview them.
I have my phone, and I'm like, oh, sorry. Someone called. Meanwhile, no one called.
Well, when I became a journalist, I realized that journalism is great for shy people because it gives you this arsenal of tools, basically how to ask questions. Everybody's interesting, and everybody's an expert about themselves. So I don't really interview, but when you start engaging people in their own stories, it was a path out of shyness for me. So I actually think
really
journalism works for shy people really well. Yeah. But that feeling of slight disquietude, nervousness, I think it does make us perform better. I think it wakes us up. So one of the points in the book has to do with the neuroscience around automating. We automate processes, like walking and breathing, so that we can conserve mental energy.
So you end up somewhere, you don't know how you got there.
Then we start automating other things, the drive home, spending time with your child. Like we actually start kind of going on autopilot when we shouldn't. And I think when we're slightly uncomfortable, nervous, when you have those butterflies, you're very in the moment. You're very aware of your body. You're very aware of what you're doing. And that is very empowering because it actually lets you control your behavior in a way that you don't when you're on autopilot.
And you say it's good for people who are creative, and it allows them to be innovative.
There's tons of evidence that shows that creative people like to occupy the messy, ambiguous parts of life, and in fact, they create it for themselves. So one thing I've discovered is that very powerful CEOs and leaders seek out things that are beyond their comfort zone. So they're great at the office, but they go on, volunteer trips to Haiti, in one real example, because they want to experience things that they're not great at. They don't necessarily get and understand off the bat, because they know that's where they thrive.
Now, you grew up with 6 brothers and sisters.
Yes.
What did they teach you about tolerating discomfort?
Well, pretty rough justice when you grow up in a big family. And actually, one of the things that I write about, and I think I lived naturally, is helicopter parenting. How on the schoolyard now we're so fixated on, for instance, protecting kids from being bullied by one another. And of course, that's a good thing. Bullying is bad. But there's a certain amount of kind of rough treatment of each other that little kids need to do. And they need to understand how to accept and what the limits are. And when we kind of take it all out of the equation and say everybody's going to be nice all the time, we're removing reality. So I grew up in a house where if you did something that offended your peer, because we were all 7 kids in 6 years,
Wow.
by the way, then you learned pretty quickly what the penalty was. And there was no adult there to fix that for you. You had to fix it on your own. And I think that's something we need to do with our own children. Let them struggle.
And you write that you want your son to be able to tolerate discomfort and learn from it without being scared by it. What do you mean by that?
I want him to have resilience. It's what we all want as parents. And the hardest thing as a parent is watching your child fail at something, be unhappy about not being good at something. But we cannot manage through that for them. They need to learn to live in that place. And so I've really tried to practice letting him be, let him struggle a little bit, because that learning to struggle and coping with it is something that happens. We're going to need it all through our adult life.
And you're not always going to be there to
Not
fix
always
it.
going to be there. So now what we have is a generation of kids that have been parented in this way, getting to the workforce. And in some ways, employers are having to reparent them, to teach them resilience, how to take criticism, how to come back after you fail. You know, I just interviewed somebody senior at Google, and she was investing in things, and she went to her boss to say this is her failure rate, and she was, she doesn't like whatever it was, 8%, and he said that's too low. If your failure rate's that low, it means you're not risking things, and we want you to be risking things. That's kind of the mentality I think we need to give kids, which is if it's not literally going to kill you, it is going to make you better.
And that's what parents should be teaching their children.
I think so, yeah.
A lot of schools, you write that, you mentioned before about being uncomfortable with children, but you say that it affects gifted children the most?
So this, and I know this firsthand, because my son is very bright.
Of course.
When things come easily to them, they don't learn the rule of effort. They don't learn the payoff of working hard at something and then having that breakthrough moment. And if you don't learn that, it's just a skill. You think, if I'm bad at it, I'm not going to try. I'm going to give up on it right away. So actually, one of the things I really work on with my own son is this notion of trying hard is the reward. You know, it's incremental improvement that you should be seeking, because in life, most of the really hard things are not instant gratification. The hard things, like a fulfilling career and a great relationship, these are hard things that take resilience and lots of attention and setbacks as well. So I'm just trying, the more natural ability a kid has, the more you have to create situations for them to struggle in.
And you also touch on something that seems to be in the news a lot, what and how educators can teach their students. Why is this problematic?
Well, I think, all know, and educators know this better than anyone, that the system was not constructed for the way kids need to learn to think today, for the skills they're going to need in the jobs they're going to have. And I don't mean coding. I mean thinking creatively. I mean non-rote learning. I mean actually kind of innovative styles of thinking. And letting people think the way they think, rather than teaching them sort of that there's a right and there's one answer and there's a right and a wrong. Letting them actually be themselves a little more. So I think the challenge for schools is we still teach in the old-fashioned way. Teachers do their best, but we're not actually preparing kids the way they should be.
You write this thing, which I really love. You say schools are working hard to avoid giving offense instead of teaching kids how not to take offense.
You know, I don't know about you, but I'm amazed at how, in our politically correct world, how quickly people are offended by comedians, by an offhand remark by a politician, by just something they haven't even taken the time to really understand. And I was raised with that saying. It's just as important not to take offense as it is not to give offense. We can all just take a breath and say, was this person really trying to offend me? And what does my taking offense get any of us? Does it get us to a shared understanding or a better place? Usually the answer is no. It's just an emotion that you experience that's no good for anybody.
Now, in my personal copy of your book, it's really marked up. This is the nice fancy one. But in this book, you write about all these incredible people who at some point in their lives experienced hardship, whether it's a personal goal or a challenge with health, but they didn't stop, they fought on. How did you choose who to profile?
You know, it was really serendipitous, and it happened partly from talking to people about what I was doing, and they would say, it was this weird sort of bucket of things. With my first book, I just had to go seek out innovators. That's easy, people who have created things or are operating in that world. In this one, I was looking for people who had experienced discomfort, experienced big change, and managed it well. So it was a process of talking to friends and family about who they know, their extended circle. You know, I have one friend who actually led me to two of the people in this book.
And which ones?
Jim Moss is one, and Jennifer Heil is the other, and my friend is Terry Stewart. And one, Ray Zahab, chapter 2, I met him on a red eye from Vancouver one night, and we got to talking.
And Ray is the one that created Headspace?
No, Ray is the long distance, the marathoner.
Who had a huge blister and decided that it was still safe to run through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know about you, when I get on a red eye, I want to go to sleep.
Yeah.
I do not want Chatty Charles next to me. And this man started talking, and I thought, oh no. And then within about 90 seconds, I realized I'd met one of the most interesting people I was ever going to meet. We talked the entire way, and then I interviewed him a bunch of times for the book. So it's just serendipity where these people come from. The truth is, they're all around. Everybody has, as I say, everybody has a great story, and everybody has had a story of discomfort at some point if you dig it out of them.
Can you tell us more about Ray?
Well, Ray is, he was a young man who had, you know, he was doing fine. He had sort of started a business, but he wasn't feeling his potential. And you know, when businesses take people rock climbing or to take them out of their element, I've never really understood why that worked. Well, it worked for Ray because he started doing things, and it was literally a rock climb on ice, that he was sure he couldn't do. He was looking at this sheet of ice thinking, no way. He was with his brother, John, and he did it. And standing at the top, he experienced a feeling for the first time in his life. This is what I mean by this is what I want my son to learn long before this age. And that was, I just survived that, and this feels incredible. It was a rush of adrenaline. And so Ray actually exhibits something that happens when you start pushing beyond your comfort zone into your discomfort zone. It can be addictive. It feels great. Once you realize you're okay with it, it feels great. So now he's an ultra-marathoner. He runs the globe. He's run every long, and ultra-marathoning is, you know, I don't know, 700 kilometers over 6 days.
Like I can't even run around the block.
It's more than a marathon a day for 6 days in a row.
Wow.
He started a company with his wife called Impossible to Possible, and because it's for kids in school, and he wants to take these 17 and 18-year-olds and have them experience what he experienced much later. So
and also to learn not to give up.
Not to give up, and understand that it is actually the pushing through the discomfort that is the reward. That's what he finds so rewarding. It's not actually crossing the finish line, it's the discomfort he managed on the way.
And knowing that you can sustain that.
You can do it.
Some of the other people that you feature, someone created an app. You also feature a person who wanted to become a coach in the NBA, and he fulfills that dream. And also someone who wins a medal at the Olympics. What common trait did they have that allowed them to embrace the discomfort instead of walking away from it?
So it's funny, they're all so different, right? They're men, they're women, you know, they're all different ages.
Teenager, yep.
And one of the key things that is different is some of them had change thrust upon them. The guy that created the app lost the ability to walk and had to relearn. And then there's this coach who helps Tristan Thompson of the Cleveland Cavaliers change his shooting hand from left to right after he'd signed a multi-year, multi-million-dollar contract. Crazy. That's the kind of change we choose. That can be the hardest of all. You know, so they don't have anything in common per se, but they exhibit a similar kind of optimism about life, and that's a really important point because when you learn to live in this place of discomfort and understand that it's not as threatening as you thought, that change isn't threatening, you do become more optimistic. Because we all get up every day and we fear the unknown. We fear catastrophe, and when you know that you can survive things you didn't think you could survive, it gives you a kind of a natural resiliency and a natural kind of sense of calm. And so they're happy people, is what I would say, it's what makes them really nice to be around.
But even Coach Love, at one point he was working in television, and then he started delivering mail. When he came up with this idea to become a coach in the NBA, he's in Canada. What about him made him successful? Because I'm sure people must have been like, you're dreaming.
People, and he himself said for a long time, okay, I'm still a mailman. He was delivering mail when he finally made this decision that he would actually start these clinics and take this seriously. What allowed him was he let his dream guide him. He wanted it so badly. It helped that at the time there were no shooting coaches. He is now one of many of the teams now understand that a shooting coach is different than a straight up coach, that it's this specialized thing that makes sense. He was one of the first. And so he just doggedly pursued it, even though, and you know what he had to do was overcome the voice that said, Dave, what are you thinking? You know,
who do you think you are?
You're not this. He said, why aren't I that? Why can't I be that? And that's, interestingly, exactly what he has to get his players to see. Why can't I do it? It's going to be hard. It's going to take repetition. It's going to be something that doesn't feel natural. But I have to believe in the end goal and stay with it. That's something he imparts to them.
And another thing that he tells his players is don't be comfortable. Don't become comfortable, because when you become comfortable, that's when your numbers go down.
100%. You know, he says there's actually these moments of jeopardy for somebody who's acquired a new skill like that, because they start to automate. And when you start to automate, you're going to slip back into your old habits. Yes. So he says there's actually somebody will make a big change in their throw, and then they'll get a little cocky, and they'll say, well, I've got this now. And that's actually the moment when they're most likely to fail. He says it's okay if they fail, but they need to bring that back into what they're doing and help them change again.
You also write that while we may be wired as a species to avoid discomfort, we mentioned Ray and Jim, you have to learn how to embrace it. How does stress build resilience?
So stress is an interesting one, because stress is actually an inhibitor of all kinds of good things. And one thing that I discovered in writing this book is when you want to acquire knowledge or information, stress is the single biggest thing that will slow you down. So, for instance, if you want to go learn something, you know, it could be anything, kickboxing. If you're nervous about it, you're not going to do as well. You're not going to learn it as well. You're not going to take in the knowledge in the same way. So the first thing we should be doing when we're doing something that scares us is self-soothing and saying it's okay, it's going to be fine. Once you lower your anxiety level, you can actually acquire the knowledge. There are all these different tools that I write about for people in hugely stressful situations, including in the military. And one thing that they've found is that mindfulness, being present, is actually the path to reducing your stress and anxiety.
Well, how does mindfulness help us get through difficult situations?
So mindfulness is, you know, a much used term these days. We talk a lot about it. And in fact, there's a whole school of thought that meditation is the path to achieving this sort of presentness. What I mean by it is, and the thing that will help you in moments of discomfort push through, is when we pay attention, we're actually shifting the power from our old brain to our new brain. Our prefrontal cortex is a newer brain in terms of our neurological evolution. And it's the one that doesn't overreact, it's not over-emotional, it is the thoughtful brain. So if we're letting our fear and anxiety rule us, it's our old brain that's in charge. And we're not going to actually behave as well or make good decisions. And we're going to feel as though the uncomfortable thing is bigger than it is. So somebody who's craving a cigarette, for instance, when they're trying to quit, will actually describe it as they think they're going to die if they don't get a cigarette. It feels like a wave, huge thing coming at them. If they practice mindfulness, as one of the people in my book trains them to do, they actually sit there and say, okay, what does this craving really feel like? How do I really feel right now? Well, okay, it's annoying. Am I really going to die? Is it really a wave? So just by paying attention to it, they actually can minimize it and get it back into something that they can say, well, I can wait 5 minutes.
Right, like
and see how I
identifying
feel.
what triggers that feeling.
Yes, and sitting in it, actually paying more attention to it.
You sit in it, because most people would want to just get out of it.
Turn away.
Yeah.
In this case, the trick is to actually pay very close attention. What am I feeling? What is that sensation? And that helps it go away. It's when we kind of let that older reptilian brain be in charge that it just becomes this flood of emotion around something. And then
you eat the full cake,
and
you
then
don't know why you
for
ate
the
the whole cake, right?
Exactly.
I want to go back into the book about another person that you write about, and this is Linda Hasenfratz. Who is she and what happened to her?
So Linda is the daughter of Frank Hasenfratz, who founded Linamar, which is one of our most successful auto parts companies in Canada, hugely successful. And when she was a young woman, she didn't want to go into the family business. There was no sense that either she or her sister were going to work there. And in fact, her dad started the process of figuring out how to take it public so that there would be some succession plan. And she was off being a pharmaceutical sales rep when she realized, you know, my dad runs a pretty sizable business. It's a $100 million business. I actually have a shot at running that company. It's kind of cool. And so she started in the business, but he wasn't going to hand it over to this, you know,
He wanted her to earn it.
20-something-year-old that he'd built this business. So he said, okay, you come in, but you start on the shop floor. And you're going to rotate through every job we've got so that you can figure out inside and out how this works. And you're going to have to do well at those jobs along the way. And so she gets there. She's the boss's daughter. She's 22 or 23. She's blonde-haired, blue-eyed, gorgeous. And you can imagine that, there were people around who didn't think she should be there, who didn't think she deserved it. And so what she had to do was show them that she did, that she could do the job, that she wasn't playing off any kind of special treatment. And the funny thing for Linda was she had to do it over and over and over because she kept moving from job to job to job.
So once she mastered something,
so
then she had to go to a different department.
These people now respect her and know she's
and
working.
then earn that respect all over
Start
again.
it over again.
One thing in particular about this story stuck out to me, and it was the advice that you write that Linda gives to young women. You write that Linda says, if you're looking for a negative opinion, you're going to find it. Just ignore it. Don't look for it. And when it comes anyway, don't take it personally. You write that how Linda approached discomfort was that she depersonalized the criticism. What do you mean by that?
So the way she would put it is tune it out. So there's like a radio frequency, just tune out that noise and focus on where you need to focus. So in her case, she needed to focus on getting along with people, doing a good job, working as hard as she possibly could, and she was going to ignore anything else that was going on because it wasn't going to help her. It was going to undermine her self-esteem or her self-confidence. So depersonalizing is really to say, is that really about me? Do I really need to, am I anything but a hardworking young person trying to make her way? No, I'm not. So I'm going to ignore all of that and see what happens. Tuning out is actually one of the strategies for discomfort. It doesn't always work. It's the opposite of mindful. So you got to make sure you're getting your strategies right. Yeah. But in my own life, people have said, "What have you done that made you uncomfortable?" And I remember moving to New York City. As a shy person, when I was 27, didn't know anybody in New York. And I look back at it and think, what was I thinking? How did I do that? Yeah. And what I did was I ignored all of the common sense that said I shouldn't. I tuned out my own fears and just powered through until I could wake up and say, this is really working for me. But in terms of the decision itself, I couldn't actually focus on all those details. So that's the advice she's giving.
And you also write that when we feel like we are in control, or if we have some kind of control in the situation, it helps us to deal with the discomfort better?
There are actually fascinating studies on this.
Yeah.
For instance, heart patients who think they have some control over the outcome of their surgery do way better post-operatively.
Why is that?
Then it's just something about mentally how we manage pain and how our bodies respond changes when we feel in control. There was a study in an old folks' home that old people given a plant to water or the choice between 2 different types of food on Wednesday night literally made them live longer. The people in this group lived longer than the people who just were being treated the way that they had always been treated, no plant. The sense of control is so important because it keeps us from catastrophizing, keeps us from really kind of blowing up in our minds again what's happening to us. It's really important for employers, businesses to understand that if they are asking their employees to make a big change without giving them some kind of agency in it, then it will not work. It will fail. The employees really need to understand the why of something, and then they need to feel like they have control. And you can manufacture that. It doesn't have to be real. For our kids and for, you can actually make people think they have control. It doesn't matter. If they think they do, it will work.
What do you want people to get from these stories?
I am hoping that it helps people live a more full, mindful life. It really is, The Power of Why excited me so much because it was about being curious and engaged in your own life. I hope this book kind of helps with that to say, okay, you're curious, you're engaged. These are some of the pitfalls you're going to encounter. Or if something's happened to you that's really hard, as happens to a lot of people, here are some of the strategies from people who've gone through it that might help.
And you mentioned that when you moved to New York, you were in a state of discomfort. How else have you dealt with discomfort in your own life?
I have used a variety of these strategies. So tuning out is sometimes the right thing to do. Depersonalizing can often, as you know, when you're in the public eye, there will be people who don't like you. There will be critics. And to me, I got the best advice from my dad when I was 11 or so, which is either what they're saying isn't true and you should completely ignore it, or it is true and you should think about it, act on it. And that's been super helpful as a broadcaster because sometimes people will, email you about your lipstick. You can ignore that.
Yeah.
And sometimes they email you to stop talking so fast or stop interrupting, things that actually are true criticisms of me. And it's really helpful. Yeah. It's a good check on me.
Do you have any advice for people, that can help them deal with uncomfortable situations, like say 3 things?
I would say the first thing is pay attention. So get a little mindful because if you want to figure out what the best strategy is, you need to sort of understand how you're feeling, what you're feeling. Is it tuning out? Is it actually digging deeper? And then the next thing I would say is soothe your anxiety. because you are, whatever you're feeling about the discomfort, it's probably not, it's probably overblown. We tend to do that. And then the third one is don't be afraid if you're not good at it. Don't be afraid if you can't soothe it right away or you can't solve a problem right away. You're going to be okay. It's that sort of look for, be a little optimistic. Optimism and forgiveness. Forgiveness for the past, optimistic about the future, keys to happiness.
The last year that you were at the CBC, because everybody knows you're at the CBC, was a challenging year. Did that year come into play when you were writing this book?
Yes and no. I mean, there were moments of discomfort in that period, for sure. The people that I write about in this book have dealt with things that are so profound that I've experienced nothing like it. I can't compare moving to New York to losing the ability to walk or being wrongfully imprisoned like Maher Arar. So in some ways, I suppose, I actually had to ask myself the question, what makes me the most uncomfortable? Because it seems silly not to. And
what is that?
The truth is, I'm so private. It's that shyness. So the thing that makes me most uncomfortable is being discussed or in the public eye. Ironically, it's what I chose to do for a living. So that's just something that I've had to work through for years as a broadcaster, and that's something that will continue. It's just the nature of when you have this personality.
And it's interesting that you said that, because I felt, when I heard that you were coming on the show, I'm like, there's no way I'm talking to Amanda Lang. Amanda Lang is here, and I'm over here, and there's no way. But, this book is just absolutely incredible.
Well, you're delightful.
So thank you so much for writing it, and continued success.
Thank you.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.